Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Carer Knowledge Exchange, Recognising, Respecting, Reimagining 50 Years of Learning from Carers and Shaping What Comes Next. My name is Sharon Gudu, the CEO at Carers New South Wales, and it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you today, and it's great to see so many people joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to open this event by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I am joining on from today, the land of the Gadigal Wangal people, and I pay my respect to elders past and present from this land, as well as from all of the lands that you are on today. Please do feel free to add the lands that you are joining from today in the chat. Please note that today's session will be recorded and shared for on-demand viewing. We do ask that you make sure you mute your microphones so that we can hear the presentations and the panel discussion. We recognise that we have many carers and others with lived experience joining us for this session. If you hear anything today that causes you distress and you need to talk to someone, we have a wellbeing officer available online. You're welcome to contact them anytime for one-on-one support. More information about how to do that will be posted in the chat. Okay, the Carer Knowledge Exchange Symposium brings together participants from diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise. Our aim with this event is to create a positive learning environment for all participants that is based on kindness and respect, where all perspectives are valued. You are welcome to add questions and comments in the chat throughout the session. I want to take a few minutes to explain what the Carer Knowledge Exchange is, why this event matters in the context of the next 3 days, and how it connects to half a century of working to recognise and support carers. The Carers Knowledge Exchange is Australia's only dedicated research, translation and knowledge exchange platform for carers. It's a project led by Carers New South Wales and has been funded by the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. It was established to bridge the gap between evidence and action at a system level so that carer research, lived experience and practice wisdom can be systematically connected to the decision makers who shape policy, design services and allocate funding. This is our 5th Research Incubator event. Over the next 3 days, we welcome researchers, carers, policymakers and practitioners from across the state and country to share knowledge and learn from each other. We have a program that looks back at 50 years of carer research, examines the present and looks forward to what needs to change in future to improve outcomes for carers. So 50 years, just want everyone to sort of sit with that. It's pretty extraordinary. This year marks a significant milestone for us. It's 50 years of Carers New South Wales. Pretty fantastic. That means 50 years of listening to carers, 50 years of advocating for change, and 50 years of working to ensure that caring is recognised, supported, and valued in our community. Today is both a moment to celebrate and to reflect. Because when we talk about 50 years, we're not just talking about an organisation, we're talking about the lives, experiences, and contributions of carers across generations. And to understand why that matters and why we invest in platforms like Carer Knowledge Exchange, we would like to go back to where it all began. 50 years ago, people were caring in their homes, often alone, often unseen, and without support. There was no formal recognition, no shared language, and very little understanding of what caring truly involved. What changed began with a simple but powerful act. Someone asked the right questions and took the answers seriously. In 1976, a report titled Dedication, Caring for the Aged at Home, captured these experiences for the first time and gave a voice to carers' lived realities, their commitment, their challenges, and the gaps in support around them. It made visible what had, until then, been largely invisible. And from that moment, something important began. A committee was formed within the New South Wales Council on the Ageing, and a movement started to take shape. That committee would go on to become Carers New South Wales. Across the decade, that commitment has grown and evolved. In the 1980s, we established counselling services, expanded beyond Sydney, and advocated for financial recognition of caring, contributing to the introduction of the carer pension. In the 1990s, carers entered the national conversation through programs, policy reform, and various initiatives, and the first National Carers Week. In the 2000s and 2010s, Carers New South Wales became the peak body in the state, contributing to national leadership and legislative recognition through the Carer Recognition Act. And in the 2020s, we continue to strengthen the connection between research, policy, and lived experience through initiatives like the National Carer Survey, Carer Gateway Delivery, and the Carer Knowledge Exchange, and through really strong partnerships with government agencies to embed carer-focused policy and practice throughout our service system. Throughout all of this, one thing has remained constant. Progress happens when we listen to carers and act on what we hear. Today, as we mark this 50-year milestone, we reaffirm that commitment to listen, to learn, and to turn evidence into action. Over the next 3 days, we will explore this journey together, reflecting on the past, what we've learned from 50 years of carer voices. We will examine the present, where are we up to today, and we will look to the future to shape what comes next, as we know there remains a lot to do. Carers continue to face significant financial pressure, continued challenges in the work and education space, and there are still gaps in support, and support systems remain complex and inconsistent. Too often, carers are still invisible until they reach crisis. So while progress is real, it is not yet enough, and there is more work to be done. Our theme this year, recognising, respecting, reimagining, 50 years of learning from carers and shaping what comes next, reflects both where we have come from and where we need to go. Recognition means carers are visible in data, in policy, and in services. Respect means carers' knowledge and expertise are valued and properly supported. And reimagining means building systems that work around carers rather than expecting carers to navigate those systems alone. So over the next 3 days, I encourage you to approach and engage with this event with intention, to listen deeply to the voices of carers, to challenge your assumptions about what support looks like, and to ask what needs to change. Not just someday, but now. What would it take for carers to care without sacrificing their health, income, or future? And how can we design systems that truly work around carers at every stage of life? In closing, this milestone is not just about looking back, it's about recognising the voices that brought us here, acknowledging the progress we have made, and committing to a future where carers are visible, valued, and supported every day. So thank you for your participation, and we look forward to this journey with you. Next on the agenda is a keynote speaker, Sue Yeandle. We're very pleased to include this keynote presentation from Professor Sue, whose work has made a significant contribution to the understanding of carers' experiences and the development of carer-related research and policy internationally. Sue actually is in the UK, and it is the middle of the night there right now. So she has very kindly provided us with a recording of her keynote speech. And I hope you will sit back. Hopefully you've got a cup of tea or coffee and listen to Sue, because she's absolutely awesome. Sue is a Professor Emeritus at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Sheffield and was the Director and Principal Investigation of the ESRC Centre for Care until 2024. She's a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences, founding Editor-in-Chief of the International Journal of Care and Caring, and was formerly Director of the Centre for International Research on Care, Labour and Equalities. We could not ask for a more qualified keynote speaker today. In a keynote, which is titled From Small Beginnings, Ways Australian Research, Knowledge Exchange and Advocacy Have Shaped the Global Carers Movement, Sue will reflect on the impact of the Dedication Survey and Claire Stevenson on the carer movement and how these insights have shaped research, policy and practice. Her talk is based on her book that is soon to be released called Carers, Organisations and Their Impact, the Creation of a Global Movement, and that will be available from July. Following Sue's keynote, our Manager Research and Development, Lucas, will lead you through the next part of this morning's session. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that these discussions create opportunities to learn from one another and inspire action moving forward. So we'll now listen to the wonderful Sue. Thank you.
Good morning, and greetings from the University of Sheffield in England. I feel very greatly honoured today to join your celebration of 50 years of Carers New South Wales and to be invited to speak to you at this important event that you're organising as part of your celebrations. I've chosen as my title for the talk I've been invited to give, From Small Beginnings, Ways Australian Research, Knowledge Exchange and Advocacy have shaped the global carers movement. But I think I should begin with a little bit about myself and my interest in carers organisations in Australia. I've spent much of the past 25 years researching carers' lives, carers' needs and carers' organisations, first at the University of Leeds and more recently at the University of Sheffield. And some of you will know that I've been involved for much of the last 20 years with both Circle, the Centre for International Research on Care, Labour and Equalities, and the more recently developed Centre for Care, which is now led by Professor Kate Hamblin. My name is Sue Yeandle. I'm the Emeritus Professor since my retirement last year. And I'm delighted to share with you some of thoughts based on work that I'm about to publish in July of this year. I first visited Australia in 2013 when I was invited by someone most of you will probably know, Professor Bettina Cass, who very kindly invited me as a visiting scholar to the University of New South Wales when she was working there at the Social Policy Research Centre. Bettina arranged for me during my visit to meet Elena Katrakis, who at that point was newly appointed or relatively newly appointed as the CEO of Carers New South Wales. And Elena gave me a very generous and informative and stimulating interview, which greatly provoked my interest in studying carers organisations, not just in the UK, where I was familiar and had been working with carers organisations for some while, but also in Australia and indeed around the world. Since that time, I've had the opportunity to speak at a number of conferences, including some organised by Carers New South Wales and by Carers Australia, and I've been privileged to have some very fruitful collaborations with a number of researchers at the University of New South Wales, at the University of Sydney and at Macquarie. In 2017, with Michael Fine, who I believe is on the panel which will follow my talks this morning, and with others around the world, I established the International Journal of Care and Caring. That journal, on which Michael is still on the board, was under my leadership for its first 8 years. And I know that Michael and I are both very proud of what it's achieved, and in particular of the way in which it's helped to spread knowledge and information about research and studies and policy developments in care and caring and how they affect carers all around the world. Australian contributors to the journal have been really significant and have published some very notable and important articles during the time the journal's been running. In July, as I mentioned, my new book will be published. It's called Carers Organisations and Their Impact, the Creation of a Global Movement, and it will be available at the end of the month of July in open access form so that anyone around the world with an interest in carers organisations and in carers should be able to read it. It tells the story of the emergence and development of the international carers movement, and in particular, and something I'm going to talk about today, it includes the crucial part played in that story, both by carers organisations in Australia and by the series of international carers conferences which were held between 1998 and 2017. So I turn next to the work of carers organisations in Australia. The story of carers organisations in Australia begins, of course, with Claire Stevenson, whose name will be very familiar to most of you listening to this talk. You know her as the founder of the Carers Association of New South Wales and as a really important pioneer of the carers movement, both in Australia and, I would argue, around the world. But I wanted to begin really with something to do with what inspired her remarkable contribution and the circumstances in which that arose. And that takes us right back to the early 1970s, when Avril Fink, who would later be a president of Carers Australia, was the executive director at the Council on the Ageing, based in Sydney. And in 1974, COTA was, and Avril Fink in particular, were keen to make a contribution to what the following year would be the International Women's Year, celebrated around and marked around the world. And they wanted to make an important contribution for that, and they applied for some funding to run a survey which would be on the topic of single women caring for others. The focus of the Carers organisation, which in 1965 had been established in England by Mary Webster, herself a single woman who had cared for her parents, and which the Australians had by this time gained some knowledge of. The survey which they developed when the application for International Women's Year funding was successful was run between June and December of 1975. And as it had said it would, it targeted single women. Leading the development of the survey was Claire Stevenson, already at that time aged 72. Claire Stevenson is a most remarkable woman who has an extraordinary and most impressive backstory, which I don't have time to go into details about today, but I'm sure she will be celebrated for many of the things she's done in your own celebrations in Australia. But she was given the task of developing the survey, and she did so with the help of an academic at the University of Sydney called Ronald Wild. What came back in response to their sending out of mailings of letters with the survey within them, a new experience for them. No one had done a survey of people's caring responsibilities in Australia before. They generated double the expected number of responses. Not only did they receive 210 responses, this was in the Sydney and surrounding area, from daughters caring for their parents, the group they had been targeting, but they also received 97 responses from wives caring for their husbands, 25 responses from sisters caring for siblings, 45, to their great surprise, from men, and 36 from carers of people providing care for more than one member of their family or friend group who was perhaps not in different circumstances. Michael Fine would later describe this as a carers movement study that was both prophetic and foundational, and I could not agree with him more. The survey was written up by Claire Stevenson in her 1976 report, which she entitled Dedication. But a question she had to address and resolve before it could be published was what she was going to call the respondents to the survey, who had been expected to be single women caring for others, and who in fact turned out to be all carers in a wide variety of circumstances. There was no language for carers at this time, and it had to be invented. And it was Stevenson who decided to call her respondents the carers. In doing so, she produced the first published study in research in which that terminology was used anywhere in the world. Following the response to the report, which was a fantastically detailed and very interesting and well-written piece of work, which you would enjoy reading today, Claire Stevenson drew a number of volunteers together and formed what would become the Carers Association of New South Wales. This too was a landmark development because in doing so, they formed the world's first organisation to mobilise about all carers. The carers organisations in England at this time were still about carers in a specific group, and it wasn't until 1981, when the Association of Carers was established in England, that the UK had a similar carers organisation. The Carers Association of New South Wales, which didn't change its name for some years, was volunteer-led for quite a long while. And it was only in 1987 that funds were secured. I think it was HAC funding, which became available from the Australian government, which enabled them to appoint their first part-time staff. Claire Stevenson's continuous lobbying, pressuring and representations nevertheless were having a great impact in the years when she was at its helm. And they led to carer pension in 1985 and laid the groundwork for the establishment of the Carers Association of Australia, which would be formally established in 1993. Claire Stevenson, however, died in 1988, so she did not live to see that particular achievement. In 1993, the Government of Australia also published a very important report entitled Australia's Welfare, Services and Assistance. And this was the first really significant response to the sea change in thinking about care and caring and the support of older and disabled people provided by carers that had been generated by the carers movement in Australia. A most important development, and appearing in the same year as Carers Association of Australia was funded with support from the Australian government. By this time, carers organisations existed also in all the Australian states and territories. And in the book, where I write about this, I show how almost all of these emerged from grassroots activism. And in the book, I talk about developments in Queensland and in South Australia, in Victoria and in Tasmania, as well as in New South Wales. Obviously, I can't go into those in a short talk today, but if you're interested in those, there will be more details there. Also in 1993, a new CEO was appointed at Carers New South Wales, Joan Hughes, who held that post until 2006, when she moved on to become the CEO at Carers Australia. That decade in the 1990s was a pivotal decade for the carers movement, both in Australia and around the world. And so I'm going to focus on that in the next part of my talk. There is evidence of quite significant contact between the UK and the Australian carers organisations during the 1970s and the 1980s. And this provided the background to the developments in the 1990s which would emerge when the Carers Association of Australia was launched in 1993. Jill Pitt-Keithley, again, someone who many of you will know about, who was at the helm of then the Carers National Association from 1986 until 1998 in the UK, was at that launch. And she was a significant supporter and contributor to the emergence of carers organisations, not only in Australia, but also in many other parts of the world. By the mid-1990s, however, and this was an initiative of the Australians, the Australia carers organisations began to urge Jill Pitt-Keithley that it would be great for them to establish an opportunity for carers organisations from around the world to meet, and that meeting ought to take place in London. It would become what Avril Fink, who we've spoken about already, later called the crazy idea of organising an international carers conference. And when Fink later spoke at the 1998 International Carers Conference, the first to be held, this is how she spoke about that time. She said, "It was our hope and dream to see at the conference the birth of an international movement, a coalition of carers organisations from around the world, all sharing a common definition of carers." That conference was a great success, and I'll say a bit more about it in a moment. But Carers New South Wales and many other Australian carers organisations played a vital role in all of the 7 international carers conferences which went on to take place between 1998 and 2017. And 2 of those conferences were held in Australia. The second which took place in Brisbane in the year 2000, was a great success. And the conference in Adelaide, which many of you will have attended, as I did, a very inspiring event, the 7th International Carers Conference, held in 2017. But the very first International Carers Conference, held on the 14th of May 1998, was in London at Church House, Westminster. And at that event, 29 Australians were present. That was some achievement if you think back to travel arrangements and communications at the end of the 20th century and how different they were from those today. It was the biggest delegation from any country outside the UK, and they very much made their mark. They made fantastic contributions and drew praise and enthusiasm from many other delegates present. The Australian government sent a representative from the Department of Social Services, as did Victoria's state government, which sent a representative from their Department of Human Services. It's difficult to know if other officials were present because not all of the names in the Australian delegation have affiliations listed in the evidence that is still available today. In the keynote address, which Avril Fink gave, by this time she was the president of Carers Australia, she explained the collaboration that had underpinned and provided the background to the relationship with the UK carers organisations, recalling her visit to London in 1976, also on business to do with the Council on the Ageing, where she had been the chief executive 2 decades earlier, when by chance she had met Heather Mackenzie, who at that time was the executive officer in charge of the National Council for the Single Woman and Her Dependents in London. And on return to Australia, Fink explained, I arranged for the Rotary Club of Sydney to pay Heather Mackenzie's fares to come to Sydney to address a public meeting. She goes on to add that this, in her view, resulted in the setting up of the Carers Association of New South Wales. The year 1998 was chosen for the first International Carers Conference because it marked the 5th anniversary of the Carers Association of Australia and simultaneously the 10th anniversary of the crucial merger of 2 carers organisations in the UK, the National Council for what was then called Carers of Elderly Dependents and the Association of Carers, which had been founded by Judith Oliver, always pushing for support to be widely available to all carers. And that was the merger which formed the Carers National Association, which evolved eventually by changing its name. She was influenced by the 1998 event. The Washington, D.C. event was focused on family care. At it, Australian carers organisations, I believe the Carers Association of New South Wales, won prizes for some of its innovative work, and it was, by all accounts, a huge success. 5 years later, the next conference was held in Toronto in Canada, and that was called Caregivers, Essential Partners in Care, underscoring the important way in which the carers organisations were trying to get carers viewed as people who were partnering in the care that those who needed help because of illness or disability required, rather than the sole people responsible for delivering it. In 2010, the Carers Conference was held in Leeds. I was involved in organising it, and it had support from both the City of Leeds and the University of Leeds, where I then worked. And that event was called New Frontiers in Caring 2010 and Beyond, and was very much a future-looking conference. Again, strong delegation from Australia, very important contributions from many different parts of Australia, as well as from Carers New South Wales and Carers Australia, and a very successful event. That was followed by strikingly enjoyable and impressive conference in Sweden, in Gothenburg, where the guests of honour were the Queen of Sweden and Baroness Jill Pitt-Keithley, both of whom gave powerful speeches influencing the way in which care and caring had come to be viewed. And that was called Caring, the Future-Proofing the New Demographics. It was an event at which the International Association of Carers organisation really began to get off the ground. The following conference, the last to have been held, was held in 2017 in Adelaide, Caring into the Future, the New World. How could we have known what was about to befall us all around the globe as the pandemic unfolded in 2019 before the next conference could be organised, with its such powerful effects that it had on carers all around the world, on carers organisations and on international communication. The ICCs, the International Carers Conferences, very much were key factors in the formation of IACO, which was widely supported across the carers movement, but was orchestrated by Gail Gibson Hunt in the US. And they also provided an important platform for another international carers organisation, which formed subsequently the Carers Worldwide, which was developed by London-based couple Anil and Ruth Patil in South Asia, whose work now, which I describe in the book, is paving the way for really important developments in support of carers in Nepal, in parts of India and in Pakistan. And of course, the International Carers Conferences were also a very important forum for establishing dialogue between Eurocarers organisations and in a dialogue between Eurocarers and carers organisations in the rest of the world. Carers Australia was a founder member of IACO when it was formed in 2012 and was on its governing board in 2018 and 2019 in the person of Ara Cresswell, then the CEO at Carers Australia. Before I close, I want to emphasise the important ways in which knowledge exchange has been a driving force within the carers movement. And so I turn to that issue now. After Claire Stevenson's survey in 1975 and the dedication report, which we spoke about at the beginning, many of Australia's new carers organisations themselves undertook surveys and studies, as carers organisations all around the world have done. It did indeed fall to them to begin the task of finding out about carers, who they are, what are their needs, what contributions are they making to their families, to their communities and to their societies, and how can we use this information to make the case for change and to prompt government action. This was an initiative which all carers organisations played a crucial part in practically every country I've studied. The first statewide random study of carers in Australia was undertaken in Victoria in 1993, and that's explored in considerable detail the diversity of roles and circumstances in which caring was undertaken and of carers themselves. And that was published by Schofield and colleagues in the Australian-New Zealand Journal of Public Health in 1997. As for official data on carers in Australia, the picture was not that great until the 1990s. Although in 1988, Australia's Survey of Disability and Handicap did ask it asked respondents if they were receiving any regular help from family or friends, enabling the beginnings of a picture of who was providing care to emerge from official data. It was only in 1993 when the Survey of Disability, Ageing and Caring was introduced, as the Carers Association of Australia was established in that year as well, of course, that Australia began to really lead the field in some of its evidence base on carers, and something it has had considerable strength in really ever since that time. In the 2010s, IACO, the International Association of Carers Organisations, built a portfolio of research-based resources on and about carers, sharing examples of good practices, highlighting the global state of caring around the world, and during the pandemic, hosting online events and global conversations on care. So sharing research and evidence and working together to create influential research which could shift policymaking and practices was a really core part of what IACO was doing throughout that decade. Carers New South Wales Carers Knowledge Exchange, which is organising this event today, was formed in 2021, and since that time it has reached out globally, identifying research around the world and promoting new ways of exchanging information and ideas, setting another important example to carers organisations around the world. I would have wanted to say more about the productive connections that were made across the 2010s around the issue of work and care and the reconciliation of engaging in paid employment and in undertaking care. That's been such an important issue in both the UK and in Australia. Many of you will know that the Action for Carers and Employment project, which produced the still ongoing organisation Employers for Carers, which does excellent work in the UK, and was led by Madeline Starr at Carers UK, had a significant influence on how organisations in other parts of the world, including Australia and New Zealand, had thought about and developed their policies on work and care. It's the focus of one of the 4 chapters in my book, in the part of the book concerned with the key themes which have been around which the global carers movement has aligned. And those 4 chapters are about tackling carer poverty, about recognition and respect for carers, about innovation in support for carers, including work with culturally and linguistically diverse communities and with young carers. And the 4th of those chapters is about work-care reconciliation. And I hope some of you will have the opportunity to read that when the book's released at the end of July.